Hi everyone, Dr. Joe Thorogood here. Welcome to Remarkable. This week we're going to be looking at conclusions, what a good conclusion needs to do, and how you can write a pithy, short, punchy conclusion. It's hard to get conclusions right, but they are one of the most important things to get right. Remember, as a marker, it's one of the last things that I'm going to see when I'm marking your piece of work. It's the last impression you're going to give me of your academic writing, of the strength of your argument, and most importantly, your answer to the question. Two things a good conclusion needs to do. It needs to summarise its argument. So that means that you need to very briefly review the points you have made. Now, you could do this paragraph by paragraph, you could do this by theme, whichever way you choose to organise your points in the conclusion, it should reflect the chronological progression of the argument you've made, the narrative structure that you've chosen throughout the essay. And secondly, it needs to synthesise. So what do I mean by that? Well, a synthesis is the bringing together of different things to create something new, like the instrument, a synthesizer. We're looking for you to take those different strands of the argument and to do something with them. Usually it is to give your response to that question you've been set, or respond to the prompt you've been set. And that's really what we're looking for from the synthesis. It's for you to say, okay, here are all these points I've argued. What does it all mean? And why is it important for answering the question or responding to this prompt? If you just take a little look at this graphic on the screen, you'll see that I've created a kind of funnel for thinking about the conclusion. And that's really a good way of thinking about it, actually about thinking about your whole essay. The conclusion is going to be that tiny point at the end of the funnel, right? If we think of a dirty drop of water or some river water being put through a series of filters, it's going to remove that material and keep it within the filters as you progress through them and come down to a clean, pure drop of water. That is the conclusion. The conclusion is that simple, distilled answer to the question or response to the prompt. As your argument progresses, we're looking for you to build to that logical conclusion. So point 1 leads to point 2 to point 3, point 4, and ultimately we get to my conclusion, which is this. And as we're doing that, we're looking for that increasingly focused response to your question. So we're looking for that kind of homing in on the question and building towards that detailed, specific answer to it. So it's nice to think of your essay as a funnel and the conclusion being that purified essence of the answer that comes out at the end. Some common mistakes that students make in their conclusions. Number 1, adding new material. This is not the place to do it. In exams, some tolerant markers may let you get away with it because we know you're rushing, but in a piece of coursework, the conclusion is not where you should be introducing new material. If you're doing that, you're still writing a paragraph of the essay and you're not finishing off. Secondly, make it too long. A conclusion should be short and pithy, for a couple of reasons. The first thing is we don't really want to have to go through in detail your argument. The second reason, of course, is because you've already argued the detail in the essay. The conclusion is for the quite simple, specific responses. We don't need the nuance. It's all back in the body of the essay, or at least it should all be back in the body of the essay. Number 3, making it too grand. You're not writing the conclusion to an academic book. You're not writing a conclusion to a huge novel. We don't need it to take that sort of big grandstanding position. You can just be quite simple, clear and specific. Number 4, not synthesizing. It's really important you do this because, as I've mentioned, that's how you tell us you've answered the question. So lots of conclusions might summarize the argument, but they'll forget to do that final thing. Answer the question. Give us that final distilled drop, which is the essence, the answer to your question. Number 5, not actually matching the conclusion to what they've argued before. This is one of the most jarring things to come across as a marker. It's when you read a conclusion that seems to be the conclusion to a different essay to the one you've just read. So make sure that what you say in your conclusion does match onto what's in your essay. If it doesn't, you've got problems. And the conclusion can be a really good place to actually write down what it is you think you've answered and check it's actually what you've written in the rest of the essay. So making sure there is harmony between the body of the essay and the conclusion is really very important. So what I've got in front of me here is a piece of coursework I wrote in my first year of university on the topic of development and how developing countries might be dependent on the global north for their development. So the question reads, countries of the global south are dependent on countries of the global north for their development. Using examples, discuss the extent to which you agree with this statement. Now I've taken the conclusion here and I've put it into a different Word document. So I've got two versions of it here. I've also got one below that I'll show you in a moment, but two here. The first one is that conclusion as it was written, and the second one is the conclusion with some rewrites that I've added into it. I actually don't think my first attempt was particularly bad. So if you have a look, you can see that I've done those things I said I'd set out to do. The first sentence of that conclusion is an answer to the question. In conclusion, the extent to which the global south is dependent on the global north largely depends on how development and dependency are defined. So that is me answering the question. I then go on to talk about a couple of examples, summarising the first half of my argument, and then where it says, however, in recent years, a different paradigm that offers a resistance to the economic determinism of these theories has arisen. Not a great sentence, I've rewritten it in the next one, but that is me summarising the second part of the essay before finishing. A reasonably short conclusion, it was a 2,000 word essay, so I've managed to keep it reasonably short, but it's not particularly well written and there are some things that I could do better. So you'll see I've kept that first sentence when we move over to the second example. It's got the answer to the question contained in it in the first line. That's a quite nice thing to do as a student. Immediately hit your marker with your overall response to the question, which I've done clearly there. I then started to make some changes to the sentence structure in the next sentence just to improve things. Got rid of the historically and changed did impose to imposed. Got rid of certain forms of development, just a little bit vague, turned that into the argument I was making, economically dependent forms of development. Then I've sort of changed structure around, so you see as we go through these, I've actually given that example a little bit more clearly. I've taken that SAPs and defined that acronym, Structural Adjustment Policies. I had defined that in the rest of the essay, but I just thought for the ease for the reader that would be useful to do here. Got rid of this poorly worded question, poorly worded sentence. Through SAPs in many countries involved a large degree of dependency on supranational institutions. A badly written sentence, and I kind of got rid of this however in recent years. I didn't like the way that started. I didn't feel it was particularly strong, so I've just immediately launched into a different paradigm of development. Uses bottom-up approaches led by local community groups and NGOs. So I've made that sentence shorter and then added another short sentence that again answers the question. These do not require dependency. So all of that to basically make the conclusion a little bit shorter, a little bit punchier, but to really bring out that synthesis and that summary. So if I just scroll down one more time, you'll see that adjusted version below with the kind of summary and synthesis highlighted in different colours. So it's a short conclusion. There's no large big words in there. There's no kind of grandstanding. It's just me very quickly revisiting my argument and bringing it all together to answer that question at the top there. That's all it needs to be. It needs to be quick, concise. And remember, as a marker, I've probably had to do quite a few of these. So having a nice, clear, concise, punchy conclusion means that I very quickly remember what I've just read and can go, oh yes, and this conclusion is reminding me that this person has done what they said they've done and answered the question. So those are conclusions. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.